Hi there, my name is Simão. Welcome to the second video of my series called 2 Minutes to Move. Ready to work on your chess? Come with me. Welcome back. So, we have our position set, and in the first video, I've brought you a tactical exercise for you to work on. But today, it'll be a little bit different. We'll go into positional mode. So, you can see that white has a very promising position. White is a pawn up and has a bishop for a knight in an open position where the bishop usually works quite better than the knight. However, black has just played the knight to f6, attacking white's queen on d5, and white has to choose where to put the queen. Well, I already gave you a hint when I told you that this is a positional exercise, so don't go and look for queen sacs. I'll spare you that time. So white has to choose where to put the queen and why. Is it indifferent or does this position have its own nuances? Remember what the wise men say, the devil is always in the details. This is from a game of mine, and I'll tell you what, I got it badly wrong. So, can you do better than me? I'm pretty sure you can. You can put the position in a proper set or in an online board and look at it for 2 minutes and not more, only 2 minutes. And afterwards, you have to make a move, you have to make a decision and throw in your own conclusions. So the clock is ticking. I'll be waiting for your answers in the comment section, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Hello, welcome back. So I'm really eager to know what were your thoughts and conclusions about this position. And this position arose from a game of mine, a quite recent one. It was played in December, Maya 2024. So a city in the north of Portugal, my country, and I was playing Christian Vasquez Toledo, FIDE master from Chile, and the opening was somehow a success for me. So you can see that white has what we call two long-term static advantages. One of them is being a pawn up, and the other one, as we discussed in the introduction, is having a bishop for knight in an open position, an open board. So these are structural advantages that don't change with the nature of the position. Well, they're not bound to change in quite some time. Where is black? What does black have in return or in compensation? Well, you can see that all black species are working together, and in the center of the board they are well positioned. Whereas white species, well, white's queen is very active indeed, but it will have to lose one tempo to defend itself from the attack of the knight on f6. White's rook on e1 is also well positioned, but the rook on a1 and the bishop on c1 are yet to develop. Also, since white's bishop is still on c1, these rooks aren't connected. They are split rooks, and split rooks are a tactical motive, as we'll see in the explanation in the solution. So if we could somehow put this bishop in the c3 square and then take away our queen, then white would be just winning. White would have a winning advantage, and of course this wouldn't be put as a position for you guys because black didn't have compensation whatsoever for the material disadvantage. Well, but since the bishop is still on c1 and white has still to develop the rook on e1 and bishop on c1, and also to lose one tempo returning with a queen, you can say that black has somehow a dynamic advantage, so a short-term one. Therefore, the next few moves are very, very important for the outcome of the game. So if white gets things right in the next, let's say, 2, 3, 4 moves, white can get a winning advantage if white can solve their development problems. Whereas black black has to put white under pressure and somehow get something to compensate for the material disadvantage in the next moves. Otherwise, black would be lost. There is another thing that could be mentioned in this position is that white has only two pawn islands, whereas black has three pawn islands, since one of those is a weakness, a chronic weakness on the d6 square. So black has to deal with this weakness as well, and he has to do something fast, otherwise white will consolidate. So I think there are three main candidate moves for white in this position, and those are queen d3, queen d4, and also queen takes d6. Well, queen d4 and queen d3 keep the guard of the e4 pawn so that it doesn't get taken. And well, queen takes d6 is a capture, and as we know, we should always check the checks, the captures, and the threats. So we really have to take a look at queen takes d6. And this is the first move that I would like to have a look with you guys, because it is a capture, of course, but because it was also the first move that I actually ruled out during the game. And I will explain why. So after queen takes d6, after queen takes d6, of course, black's answer will be knight takes e4, attacking both the queen on d6 and the pawn on f2. So first thing is that we have exchanged a healthy pawn on e4 for a somewhat weak pawn on d6. So this was not a very favorable trade of pawns in white's perspective. But if we could just take the time to play bishop e3, protecting f2, and play with the bishop against the knight in an open position and also being a pawn up, then I think this should be really fine for white. But of course, our queen is attacked. We don't have the time to play bishop e3. We have to play something different like queen d4. And after knight takes f2, there are some crazy lines here with bishop h6, threatening mate on g7, taking advantage of the pin. And after knight takes h3 with check, pawn takes, and rook f6, black not only defends the mate on g7, but starts building their own attack. And you can see that white's king has no shelter whatsoever. The g and the f pawns are gone, and the h3 pawn is very weak, and there are still queens left on the board. So this is really too complicated. And the main thing is that we should only go for complications when we have a disadvantage or when the initial position isn't on our favor. So in the initial position of the puzzle, as we had already discussed, it is white who has the advantage. So this is not the kind of position, although it is playable, this is not the kind of position that white should look for, mainly when white only has 2 minutes to think about the position. So I think queen takes d6 is not a good option for white, and we should look instead to queen d4 and queen d3. It was very difficult for me in the game to decide between queen d4 and queen d3, as they both seem to be a reasonable move for white. And I ended up choosing queen d3 because I didn't want black's queen to infiltrate on the c2 square, and also because I thought, well, I have a dark square bishop, I'm going to develop it to e3 or f4 or even g5 later on, and so I want to place my queen on a light square to balance the control of the two complexes of squares, light squares and dark squares. And even though this is not, generally speaking, a bad strategy, I failed to look at the position and to see what was going to be black's next plan. So I'll show you what happened in the game. I played queen d3, and black played a very logical move, queen c6, attacking the e4 pawn. So now black has 3 pieces attacking the e4 pawn, and white has only 2 pieces defending it. So f3 is the natural move. It happens that bishop f4 is the best move of the position, giving away the e4 pawn, the central pawn, temporarily, so as to activate all white's pieces. But of course, this is only the best move of the position because queen d3 was already imprecise, as we'll see. And it is really difficult during a game to come to the conclusion that you should give away your central pawn like this. You think, well, I'm doing fine. I'm a pawn up, and my pieces are getting out in just a second, so I have no reason to give up that pawn like that. So f3 is really a natural move, as well as black's next move, of course, d5. This is the last chance that black has to use the spin. So you can see split rooks are a tactical motive, as I had already talked about. So if this bishop was already developed in the f4 square or the g5 square, then d5, if d5 happened, white could just trade the e4 pawn for the d5 pawn, and there will be no problem. But in this position, white of course cannot trade because the rook on e1 would be hanging. So black's move was pretty natural, and black wants to do something with this weakness, and what better thing to do than to take advantage of a pin. So I was expecting d5, and my answer was also simple, so pawn 3-5. And black played 97, so putting pressure once again on my central pawn. And now I had two options. I could play f4, but I'll tell you what, this is a very committal move because after knight c5, attacking the queen, no matter where the queen goes, this e4 square is taken away forever. I mean, this knight can go to e4 and become an octopus knight forever because my bishop only operates in dark squares. Also, this pawn on f4 really blocks my bishop. So my bishop isn't the happiest of pieces on the board in this position. So this is really something that you think should think about twice or three times or 10 times before you play it, because it is a very committal move. Pawns cannot go back, so you can never control the e4 square again. So therefore, I didn't want to play f4, and I played queen d4, protecting the e5 pawn. But black kept pressuring me, so knight c5 was a move. You can see that there is a knight fork threatened here. I played rook e3, which is a very natural move as well, developing my rook in the third rank. But after knight e6, you can see that the position has changed a lot in the last few moves, and now black has counterplay. Black has compensation for the pawn. So why does black have compensation in this position? Well, to begin with, you can see that the black knight has reached the blockading of the passed pawn on e5, and the knight is really the best blockader ever. And this blockade also happens to be on a light square, and as we have our dark squared bishop, this knight is never going to be challenged. You see that upon avalanche with f4, g4, f5 is not really happening, as our king would be like vulnerable in the process. And also, white has wasted a lot of time going back and forth with the queen, and in the next move, white will have to move the queen as well as it is attacked. So the bishop on c1 is yet to develop, and white has to waste another move. In the game, I played queen g4, which wasn't the best option, but really this position, believe me, is already very difficult to play. Even though the engine says that white is still clearly better, in practical play, it's not that simple. And sometimes d4 can happen in the position, getting the e3 square away for the c1 bishop, so it doesn't have a very good square to develop to. Of course, when black plays d4, the e4 square returns to white's control, so this really has to be very well negotiated. But this position is getting really difficult. And in the game, I ended up losing, so congratulations to Christian for turning things around. But I really do believe that the problem started when I chose queen d3 instead of queen d4. So we can conclude that queen d4 is the right move, the best available move for white in the position. Let's start by analyzing queen c2. This was the main reason for me to choose queen d3 and not queen d4, because the queen on the d3 square controlled the c2 square. But really, queen c2 isn't something to be worried about. Actually, my opponent at the end of the game, we talked about this position in particular, and he said that queen c2 was his main option against queen d4. But actually, after f3, protecting the e4 pawn, if black plays in the same way with d5 after e5, you can see that the f3 pawn does a very good job of controlling both the e4 and also the g4 squares. And white has nothing to be worried about. Even the queen on d4 does an excellent job of protecting the b2 pawn, so when the c1 bishop is developed, everything is protected, and white is just a healthy pawn up. So queen c2 isn't really something to be worried about. So let's imagine that black plays in the exact same way as it happened in the game when white played queen d3. So queen c6, very logical move, putting pressure on e4, and after f3, then d5, exploiting the pin on the e file, and after e5, knight d7. Now, you can see that we've had this exact same position in the game, but with black to play. So if we go into this position, just a second, into this position, I just played queen from d3 to d4, back to d4 to defend the e5 pawn, and black played knight c5, threatening the fork, and so on, and so on. But now, things are different. After queen d4 and queen c6, f3, d5, e5, knight d7, we have the same position on the board, but it is white to play. So white is one tempo ahead that in the variation which happened in the game. And this is really, really decisive. In this position, I have the time that I need to develop my dark square bishop so I can play, for example, bishop d2 so that my e5 pawn remains protected and my rooks are finally connected. And let's imagine that black keeps doing the same thing, so knight c5 threatening a fork on b3. Well, then I can just play rook c1, exploiting the pin on the c file, and if black plays knight b3, this is a simple queen exchange. After rook takes c6, knight takes c4, rook c7, this is a winning endgame for white. I mean, white is a pawn up, has a protected pass pawn on e5, has a bishop against knight on an open board, is attacking the b7 pawn, white has a rook on the seventh file. I mean, this is absolutely winning. So black cannot enter this variation and cannot exchange queens. But then again, if black doesn't do this, then what is black gonna do in the next few moves? White can just play like rook from a to c1, then perhaps bishop to c, or perhaps bishop to c3, and the rook from a to d1, pressurizing the pawn on d5, which is a permanent weakness. And this is a very, very comfortable position. It is a winning position for white. It is a decisive advantage. So you can see the big difference that one tempo has made. In the game, I had several problems to face and I couldn't solve them. And if you turn on the engine yet again, the engine doesn't explode. I mean, he says that this variation is quite different than the other, but he says that in both, white is winning. But in terms of human play, believe me, it is quite different. This is a winning position for white, and I believe that if I had played queen d4, well, I'm not sure if I would win the game, of course, but my chances would be much higher than what happened in the game after playing queen d3. So the main thing, the main takeaway from this position and this game is that when we are in a complex position where one of the sides has a static advantage and the other side has a dynamic advantage, the one with a static advantage, which was me, which was white, has to be really precise during 2, 3 to 4 moves so as to take away the other side's dynamism. And if that happens, then and the static advantage remains, then we can convert the advantage into a winning position. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to send me your suggestions. Come chat with me. Come follow me on my Instagram page. I will be posting a lot there in the next couple of weeks. and I will be making some previews of the tournaments I'll be playing and to report from them as well. So thank you once again, and I will see you soon. Lots of love. Bye.